This time bringing you a video on some improvements I would like to see in Baldur's Gate 3. After the game's been out a few weeks now, people have been playing it. Myself, I've cleared it about 4 times. We've had ample opportunity to dive into it and even discover some things where some tweaks and improvements would not be unwelcome, even though much of the game is really fantastic. With that in mind, however, I did want to mention at the beginning here that I am very specifically not including things like bugs or more technical related problems in general, because we already know fixes for those things are in the works, and honestly, compared to the release of their last game, especially towards the end of it, Baldur's Gate 3 is much improved in that regard, even if there are still some pretty substantial problems in places. But in any event, fixes to those things are, again, pretty much a given. We already know they're being worked on, they're coming, etc. So there's just really not much of a point in mentioning them here, which is why this list is more about gameplay-oriented things that I would like to see. So to that end, let's kick this off and get it started with one of the things I would personally love to see the most, which is simply put a harder difficulty mode. Tactician, while certainly increasing the challenge a little bit, is still really easy if you're familiar with the system. And while 5th edition D&D and Baldur's Gate 3 is much more of a roleplay focused title, there really isn't a reason to restrict people who want a more difficult combat challenge from that as well. And I think there's a variety of ways they could approach this. They could simply add something like an Iron Man mode, or lean into the tactics and game AI side of things where enemies in general are a little more deadly and require more working knowledge of the system. But in any event, Tactician as it stands is just a little bit on the too easy side, and a higher difficulty of some sort I think would be appreciated, at least by people like myself. Now that does bring us to our second entry, which is better information display on the character creation screen. A lot of people will ask me about Baldur's Gate 3 versus Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, and while I'm still kind of waiting to make that particular video in depth, one thing I will say in that regard that Wrath of the Righteous I think does do better than BG3 is that when you are creating a character or leveling a character up, you can click a button that will show you the details of what that character is going to get as they level. And that's especially helpful for even people like new players, because that way they can look ahead at what a particular class might get, which they simply would not know if they are new to the game and the rule set. And given that the fact that Larian has made changes to the rule set from the tabletop they are using, I think that's a really important feature that could be added. And as a channel that covers primarily CRPGs, that is to say these types of games, a few recent ones have done this. Wrath of the Righteous, of course, Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire learned this lesson after their first game did not have this feature. They made sure to include it in the second one. And when you have these big complicated games, the more information you can readily provide to players who are new to it, the better off they will be. Because while I'm certainly happy to make guides and explain things that these classes will get so people can make informed decisions, reality is I also don't think people should have to turn to YouTube or guides to do so. It should just be in the game. So if you couldn't tell, it's probably the one I'm the most passionate about getting added. However, we still have a couple of more to go. The third one is more of a quality of life feature, and it is organizing the inventory of companions that are not with you, and some general quality of life improvements around the camp altogether. Now, this primarily comes down to swapping out your companions, as well as managing their inventories while they're not in your party. So as it stands, if you want to swap out a party member, you have to tell one to wait at camp and then go pick up another one from camp after you go there yourself. This requires going in and out of dialogue several times, and it's just a tiny bit clunky. So when it comes to switching party members out, when you're in camp, it would be nice if they simply had an interface that would just let you swap them out real quick without having to talk to literally at least a couple of people. Even more tedious than that, however, is managing the inventory of companions that are not in your party, because this requires you to swap those companions into your party, adjust their inventory, grab whatever you need, and then switch back. So again, an interface where we could access the inventory of all of the companions and origin characters in our camp rather than having to add them to the party to do so would be a fantastic improvement just by itself. Though speaking of camp improvements, one that comes up in camp quite a bit is brushing up some of the romance triggers. So it's certainly no secret really that romance is a big focus of Baldur's Gate 3. However, some companions, I think, to put it very simply, need to learn that no means no, because because it is possible to turn down a potential romance only to have it pop up again several more times. The most prominent example of this is probably Gale, who even if you deny the romance several times, you can actually still wind up getting dialogue and things for a romance even though you're not in one. But reality is he's not the only one. This comes up in a few more places as well with other companions, and I think this is a part of the game that could be smoothed out a little bit, which would help with the feeling that every time you step into the game's camp, you're being hit on by someone. And I think the easiest fix here is just to simply make it that when you've denied a particular companion, they just stop asking. So outside of, again, technical related problems, bugs, things like that, I would say those are some of the improvements I would personally like to see, but I would also love to hear what you, the audience, thinks about this, as I'm sure you might have many more suggestions than the ones I just mentioned, as these are simply the things that bothered me the most, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom.